Hey everybody, welcome back to World History with Mr. Finn. Today we have a map so I can show you a little bit of the areas that we are talking about or have been talking about in the Americas. So first, let me just a little backtrack here because we are getting to the Aztecs today, but I want to talk about North America. And since I have a map, I can show you about the Bering Land Bridge that I talked about, I think 2 classes ago with the Ice Age and how people thousands of years ago came to the Americas and how they got here, considering they weren't on ships coming across, the ocean from any other places. So the Bering Land Bridge is up here. So what happens is when you have an ice age, this is the North Pole. When you have an ice age and it's cold, the ice comes further down than it is normally, like right now. And so as this ice came down, it created a land bridge here between what we consider North America and Asia, and this is how the people thousands of years ago came into the Americas. And so as they come into the Americas, they're going to start settling here and here, like the Eskimos and the Inuits that I talked about. More groups come down here and move into these areas. This was the mound building areas, the Iroquois. You are also going to have people come in here. This is where we are right here in Arizona, where we had the Hopi and the Anasazi. And so you have tribes kind of just spread out all over North America. And these were the Native American tribes that we looked at when we first got into the Americas, and how there was, different tribes all over. And the climate made their cultures different. If they lived in this area, the people living here would have, hunted seals. You hear of Eskimos having igloos and things like that in snowy weather. Here is where the irrigation would be for the Native Americans living here, because there was less water in this area. There's going to be very forested. You did have some tribes who stayed put in these areas, but in the middle areas here where there was a lot of buffalo is where you would have a lot of people who were still nomads following the tribes in these, or following the buffalo in these areas of the middle of North America. Where we have gotten to is coming down to here. This is Mexico. And Mexico City is right here. We talked about the Maya and the Toltecs and the Olmecs. They're going to be in this area right here. But this is all kind of Central America. In fact, you have Central America blown up right here, but that area is down here, and then South America goes down here. We'll look at the Inca later, but today we're going to get to the Aztecs in this area. Modern day Mexico City is where the Aztec Empire will really take off, and this is where we're going to get to today. So again, a lot of the reason that we do not have a major historical context of what happened with these people in North America is that there wasn't a written history for historians to look at. It was done orally, so they would tell stories down through time, and that would be how they would record their history. So there's not a lot for us to go on as far as looking back at what happened in the year 500 AD, like where in Europe and the civilizations around the Mediterranean, there was written accounts of things happening. That's how I can tell you, Julius Caesar around 44 BC was doing this. I have, the ability to read things and, context to put it in. Whereas in the Americas, a lot of that history is lost. So we really talk about their culture and how they lived and what they were about. Because again, we don't have loads of manuscripts and books and historical records and all that stuff. We do have more here, plus when we get to the Aztecs, we are going to see the Aztecs come into contact with the Europeans, and that way we do have a written account of what is going on. Plus there were more written records for the larger civilizations like the Maya and the Aztecs, but we'll look at why we don't have as much as we would hope really right now. So for our map, North America, this is where you are. This is where I am, right here. Mexico City is where we're talking about the Aztecs rising up to become a major empire similar to the Mayans. So let's say goodbye to our map so I can tell you about the Aztecs. All right. The Aztecs. What are we doing? All right. Let me get you over here so we have more room to work with. Perfect. All right. We are talking about the, I don't like this color, Aztecs. So let's try this one. Aztecs are in modern day, that's better, modern day Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. That is where we are talking. That is where I just showed you on the map. Now, let's talk about the Aztecs. Aztecs is probably the most famous, or the Aztec are probably the most famous Native American group that we are going to look at. We look at them early in American history as well. And why? Well, we have a lot of information about them. As I said, they are going to come into contact with the Spanish from Europe. So first, let's look at the Aztec. Who are these people? How did they come into power? Where are they from? So, long story short, this group of people is going to come from northern Mexico. They're going to make their way to modern-day Mexico City, and they're going to set up, their small civilization. And they're going to start just like we talked about Rome starting and being founded in a very small group, just like the rest of the Native American tribes that we've looked at. And they're going to live. However, they are going to be attacked constantly by other groups in this area. So they have a legend. Their legend goes, we will know where to settle down, where to build our city when we see this sign. And what is the sign for the Aztecs? The sign is an eagle on a cactus eating I almost forgot the S for snake. You might be familiar with this symbol. It is the symbol on the Mexican flag. There is an eagle on a cactus eating a snake. That is the sign that the Aztecs, the legend that stated, hey, when we see this, we know that's the spot to build our city. Unfortunately for the Aztecs, this sign comes in the middle of a lake, Lake Texcoco, which you don't need to know the name of the lake, but they're like, oh man, we've been wandering and waiting to see this sign, and it's out in this like island in this, middle of this lake. How are we gonna do this? Why does it have to be there? And so what happens is they do see this sign and they begin to build their city. Now, if this was the lake, let's just make a big kind of oval type thing, and there's like, an island in the middle. What the Aztecs are going to do is they're going to begin to build their city here, but they're also going to have these causeways, they're called, that go to the side or to the edge of the lake, like this, so that they can get to this city that's in the middle of this lake. And that, actually, what they're going to, even on top of that, they're going to do is they're going to build. They have to grow crops, and the way they do this is they tie, logs together. This will be the end of the logs facing you, and on top of those, they're going to tie them together. They're going to put soil on those, and then they are going to be able to grow. Mostly corn. I don't know if I have to really draw the best corn in the world here for you. You get the idea, but why not? And so they grow crops on these, floating, little little floats. And so they build these things next to this island like this, and they go out from there, and they continue to grow more crops and more crops. And eventually, if you ever go to Mexico City today, guess what? You are not going to see a lake. It's underground now. It is under. You do not have a lake. Mexico City is on top of a lake. It is going to be basically, drained eventually of this water. So now if you went to Mexico City, you wouldn't see it. But that is what the Aztecs do, and the Aztecs are setting up this major city. Past that, they continue to grow, they continue to have more crops, and again, as we know, when you have more food, you have more people. And so, more food, more equals more people. So their population starts to go up. Their culture is one in which the men are assigned to like military order. They are a warring people, and they are going to begin to take over surrounding areas, and they're going to grow their civilization from this. So the Aztec go from being attacked and chased away into the swamps to finding their sign, building the civilization up over 100 years, and beginning to conquer other places, just like a number of other civilizations we've talked about, starting out small and then defeating other people and growing their land and their possessions and getting more money and getting more stuff. And so how do the Aztecs, we know that they're a warring people with a very good military tactics and things like that. So what they end up doing, let's get rid of our float. The term is tribute. So, tribute is stuff. Tribute is what the Aztecs demand from the people that they have conquered and taken into their empire. So, what could tribute be? Could be food, could be gold, could be slaves, could be anything of value. This is what you pay to the Aztec government, the Aztec leadership, who was it was polytheistic, meaning many gods. Their leader was a god king, descended from the gods. So they had a very distinct, absolute ruler type, government ruling class, a king, who was descended from the gods. He had the gods' favor, so you could not question them. So all of these tribes in the surrounding area around modern-day Mexico City are going to pay tribute to the Aztecs every year, and the Aztecs, because of this, doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Aztecs get rich and powerful. So, they, you might know one of the accounts that we have of these groups, including the Maya and the Aztecs and these cultures, is the belief in human sacrifice or sacrifice in general, and that would be to appease the gods, to have better growing seasons, to do things like that. So they would have times throughout the year where they would sacrifice people and animals and stuff, it's not the prettiest of ideas or thoughts, but that would be another form of tribute as well. So this is the type of people that the Aztecs were: rich, powerful, expanded and took over areas, very advanced, had the same thing like we were talking about last class with calendars and mathematics, and looked at astronomy, architecture, building huge temples. Their city, Tenochtitlan, which you don't need to know the name, the capital of their city. But what is important to understand is by the time we get to, so they're demanding tribute, they're getting rich and powerful. This is all taking place in the time of like 1300 AD to 1500 AD. In that time, by the time we get to 1500, they're going to have in the surrounding area 4 million people, not under their control, but in their empire. All right, why do I say this? 4 million people? That's crazy. That's a large, large number. 4 million people do not live in the city. We do not see another city rival Rome. Rome had 1 million people in it. We do not see another 1 million sized city until London in like the 1800s. So the Aztecs do not have a city of 4 million people, but 4 million people within their empire. So to put that in context, if we're looking at city-wise, 4 million people, I can't think really off the top of my head when we're looking at all of our civilizations, other than Rome, because Rome controlled everything. Rome had up to like 60 to 80 million people within their empire. Maybe Persia was another large scale one that would have had millions, but this is up there with the top populations that we have seen out of any civilization within their empire. 4 million people is a lot. So we are not talking about the Native American groups that we were looking at in North America in their tribes or clans, where it's 200 to maybe 1,000. We're talking about a major civilization now with the Aztecs. And so by 1500, we have 4 million people in this empire. So what happens now? I told you, the Aztecs will be the group that comes into contact with the Europeans for the first time. And that's why we know a lot about the Aztecs from historical records or accounts from the Spanish. And why we don't have as much is because the Spanish are actually going to not enjoy the Aztecs. I think, let me get to it. Let me run through it quickly because this is world history, not American history. So quickly, let's talk about 1515 with the Aztec king, Montezuma, and the Spanish conquistador is Cortez, Hernan Cortez. So I'm just going to tell you the rundown of the story. I'll give you a couple of the things that you will need to have for possible quiz things. But the Spanish are going to be the first European country to really come to the Americas and, set up shop. Like, hey, we are here. They're conquistadors coming from Spain. Conquistadors are Spanish soldiers. They're looking for gold and glory. There wasn't a lot of opportunities in Spain for them, so they would be more than likely to join with these expeditions to America and really just go on an adventure. That was the idea for the Spanish. Like, let's see what's there. So to get through this relatively quickly, Hernan Cortez is the leader of these conquistadors who come to and land in the east coast of Mexico. When they get there, the Aztecs, recognize like, hey, this is something. There's actually a legend of one of the Aztec gods returning to them, and at first they think the Spanish are messengers from this god. They quickly find out that is not the case. Cortez and the Spanish they are taken to the capital city, Tenochtitlan, of the Aztecs. They see gold everywhere, and this is like for the Spanish, these guys are looking for gold. They want to get rich. They value gold. They're like, there's gold everywhere here. This is crazy. We need to take it. We are Spanish soldiers. So they end up keeping Montezuma, not imprisoned, but they stayed in the palace of Montezuma and kept him basically tied up in a cage. Like, they didn't really kidnap him, they didn't take him away, but they had control of him, and they would just send Montezuma out every once in a while, like, yeah, these people are great, don't worry, and then they tie him up and leave him in the palace, and they just they took control over the leadership of these the leaders here of the Aztecs, for good reason here. Also, something to understand about the Spanish in Europe. Let's just say overall weapons. All right, I'll just tell you, Spanish had horses. Horses did not exist here in America, so they have the ability to have cavalry. They had steel swords. They had guns. They had stuff, cannons. They had all of these things that the Aztecs were not able to kind of combat. So the Spanish were in a place of power with weapons. Eventually, poor Montezuma, he gets wheeled out one day. Hey, these guys are great. The rest of the Aztecs say, you know what? We don't trust you anymore, Montezuma. Something's going on here. Montezuma, unfortunately, is killed by his own people. They stone him to death. They throw rocks at him. And Cortez and the rest of the Spanish conquistadors are like, yo, we got to get out of here. Quick, quick, quick. And then the Spanish conquistadors get out. But something had already been starting to spread. This is going to be a big killer in America. It is smallpox. Smallpox is a really that just kills, I'm going to say most Native Americans. It's really bad. The people living here had no immunity to this disease. If they caught smallpox, it would just ravish through like areas. It killed up to like 50% of the population. In some estimates, there's like 80 million, 90 million people who died of smallpox, Native Americans who did. It is a massive, disease. It's terrible what smallpox does to the people living here in America because they did not have a natural immunity to it, meaning they didn't have any antibodies in their system to fight it off, like people from Africa, Europe, in that area smallpox had been around. And so the Spanish conquistadors get out, but smallpox starts to spread. The Spanish come back and they destroy the Aztecs with their superior weapons. They basically wipe them out. They try to, and this is where we get to the point where we don't know as much about Aztec history because the Spanish try to erase the history of the Aztecs. They're burning all their books, manuscripts, anything that had like historical records. The Spanish were like, hey, listen, we're going to wipe them out and only our culture will exist. And so it's a very negative end for the Aztecs because they, rise to this huge empire, and then through smallpox and more advanced weapons, the Spanish with a much smaller force just completely destroy the Aztecs. We'll get to what happens next. I guess I should just finish it up now. It's a little bit longer. Give me like one more minute. So what is going to happen? Well, the Spanish are going to be here. Native Americans are going to be here. As I said, a lot of the conquistadors were young males looking for adventure, glory, and gold, and all this stuff. But they're all men. And so what does happen is this. What you're going to see in modern-day Mexico and in other parts of Central America is you're going to see this. It's culture clash, and you basically start to see this. You see the Spanish and natives coming together. And how do they come together? Well, Spanish soldiers are like, hey, there's not a lot of ladies here. I'd like to maybe get married someday. Maybe, have a girlfriend. Maybe have some significant other. And so these soldiers, in a lot of cases, will marry or will, get with some of the Native American females. And what you're going to get now is this culture clash. It's really like a genetic clash where you have these Native Americans and you have these Europeans who are now mixing together. And you see a very distinct, culture come out of this. You're mixing the genes and you have a new kind of group of you mix people together and you get a lot of different things. You have, I'm part of my dad, I'm part of my mom, you're part of something. And so you have these differences now entering the, genetic stream. And so in Mexico and in Central America, you are going to see these groups kind of come together. But the culture itself, they might come together and start having children and having, their children have other children and everyone's mixing together and, it is what it is. But the culture itself, this is the culture. The Spanish culture. If you go to Mexico today, guess what language you're going to speak? Spanish. In Mexico, there becomes a huge push for Christianity. Spanish, there's a big Catholic push. The Spanish were very Catholic. So you start to see the Spanish culture and the Spanish way of doing things in modern-day Mexico. But the people themselves are a mix of Native American, Aztec, or old Mayan heritage, and Spanish. So you will get a wide range of people, looking, the wide range of how people look in Mexico based on the fact that you're mixing together these genes. However, the culture itself will be Spanish. The Aztec or the Native American culture is purposefully destroyed by these Spanish colonizers and conquistadors. So, a little bit long today, a lot of information. Today's assignment, though, is I want you to look up Mayan, Aztec. I might as well do it now. We haven't talked about the Inca yet, but now this will give you a little bit of information. Mayan, Aztec, and Incan, put it in Inca, ruins. So that is what you're looking at. Mayan ruins, Aztec ruins, Incan ruins. I want you to take a look at some of these pictures, and I want, let's say, we'll do 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and I want 2 to 3 sentences on what you see. Because again, I want you to see what these temples look like, even though they're in ruins now. But you have an idea if you look at 2 Mayan ruins, 2 Aztec ruins, 2 Incan ruins. Tell me what you see, what's depicted there, how tall is it big, whatever. Describe what you are looking at, so I make sure that you get an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm saying they are major builders. They have major architectural sites that you don't see out of other Native American groups, especially in North America. These ones are empire size. So again, a little bit long today, but get this to me today for attendance and participation purposes, and I will see you next class where we go down to South America and we start looking at the Incas.